Dr. Mix. Hi, and welcome to the podcast number 3, where we will discuss the bass and we will have a special guest. So let me say hi to the boys first. Aaron on my right.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm the junior sound engineer here.
And Dom.
Good afternoon. I'm Dom, senior music producer here.
And we have a very special guest today, Chris Irvine, who is the product manager for music production at Yamaha UK. Thanks for coming by.
No worries, guys. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. All right, so today we will be discussing a lot about bass and how to mix it, how to record it, the do's and don'ts. But while we have Chris here, I would like to ask a couple of questions. Let's backpedal just a little bit. Dom and I have been collaborating with the keyboard department at Yamaha, and we developed a relationship, and we've done some very cool things. Chris, what have we done that's so cool?
Well, we launched the new Reface keyboards earlier this year at the very prestigious Abbey Road Studio 2, which was a very cool day. And you've also done some very successful videos off your own back as well, which have been very successful online.
That's right. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I've been I had a DX7 when I was a little kid. Now I'm dating myself, but I've always been a huge fan of Yamaha keyboards. I've had TXs, I've had, the Motive just recently, and then now Yamaha has been so kind to endorse us with the newest ones. So we've got all of the Refaces. Chris, what drives Yamaha to come up with a product like the Reface? I would like a little insight on, how Yamaha thinks when it comes to making musicians' life easier or to give them tools to express their music.
Well, that's quite a massive question, actually, to be honest, Claudio. But Yamaha's philosophy, going right back to the beginning, is to enrich people's life through music. So we are quite a unique company in the fact that we actually produce musical instruments that cover the entire instrument scope. So you tend to find that most of our competitors in the marketplace, they will focus on a specific product category. So you might get piano manufacturers or drum manufacturers. You rarely find somebody else that's able to produce guitars that are aimed at entry level but also at professionals. And then at the other end of the scale, they're also doing high quality drum kits or high quality acoustic brass and woodwind instruments. So it's really that diverse catalogue of instruments that makes Yamaha the special company to work for.
Wow, yeah, of course, I couldn't have said better. From the musician's perspective, what I know is that if I need to record something, if it's a Yamaha instrument, I'm sure it will record well, and that applies to all of the instruments that I've tried so far. I'm the lucky owner of a Yamaha Yux, which is a vertical piano, which has the same length of the strings as a baby grand. It records like a dream, fantastic. And same goes for the TRB. I've owned TRB basses. I have a great Yamaha Pacifica.
You really love that.
I really love the guitar. But I mean, it's as simple as that. Sometimes we had session players here in the room, and they would bring out their PRS or their Strats and amazing guitars. And then a specific one, the guitar player from Craig David, his name is David Ital. He comes here and he always brings that Pacifica. We always end up recording the Pacifica because for some reason Yamaha Instruments seems to always get the job done, get it done quick and effectively. Is that kind of the philosophy that's behind it?
I don't know whether that's the philosophy we actually set out to achieve. It just happens through the sheer craftsmanship that goes into all of our instruments. It's not just the top end stuff that gets the kind of high level treatment. Everything is treated in the same way, so they all go through the same levels of quality control. They all go through the same kind of thought process when it comes down to designing the instrument. So it's about producing an instrument that gives the customer or the musician the experience of playing it. It's not about making money.
Right.
There's a lot more to our musical instruments productions than just that.
I mean, it's great that you point that out because I've heard somewhere that, without passion, music is just another business. But, the longer you have been in the business, the more you understand that the people who stick and the people who are successful are, number one, the ones who don't give up. And number two are the ones who do it with a passion. So if you don't have a passion in the first place, maybe you are in the wrong place. You shouldn't be in the music at all. But yeah, this is a bit of digressing. Today we're going to talk about bass. And are there particular basses that Yamaha has got recently? I know that there is the TRB bass line. What else is there?
Yeah, I mean, the bass department isn't actually the area of the business that I cover, but as a bass player myself, I actually play a BB bass myself, so there's definitely some great basses amongst the Yamaha stable, and there's some great artists that actually play Yamaha basses as well, Nathan East being one of them.
Wow. I went so close to playing with Nathan East, he actually called me on the phone, and he went, "Hi, this is Nathan East." He had the deepest voice on planet. Probably I got a bit scared. But anyway, Chris, thank you so much for coming by. We look forward to the next stuff that Yamaha is gonna come up with. So we cross our fingers to see something new coming up soon.
Hey, it's been a pleasure, guys, and I'm going to hang around and find out all your bass tips.
Fantastic. In fact, speaking of which, let's have our theme. Right, so first things first, the bass is pretty much one of the things that is the hardest to mix because it carries a lot of energy. Now, the energy of the low end has to be shared with the energy of the kick drum. Of course, we're talking about general pop, rock, normal music. We're not touching on electronic, experimental, but in normal commercial music, bass versus kick drum is the $1 million question. How do you approach that, Dom?
Well, I agree with you. This is the most hard thing to mix. Bass is really the foundation of your track. I mean, sometimes even more important than the kick drum. I think the reason why it's so hard is because people get the source wrong. It's really important to have a very good instrument to begin with. So if you have like a cheap bass guitar, then you have many problems. First of all, you won't have consistent low end. All your different notes are going to be uneven. Of course, technique is also very important. So you have to start with the basics. If it's we're talking about a real bass guitar, like electric bass. So that's one thing that most people get wrong to begin with.
Yeah.
And when you get it wrong, it's really hard to make it right, when mixing. Of course, there are many techniques to, improve not so well recorded bass or like a mediocre instrument. But yeah, I think the most important thing is to get the recording right and to have a good player.
Yes.
So that, you have a solid bass line.
Okay. So, and this is a question for Aaron. Now, because Aaron is, of course, more specialized into preparing the sessions and making sure that everything is in the right place, can you tell me, Aaron, what are the challenges and what is your workflow when approaching bass?
Like with kick and with vocals, like we discussed the past few weeks, we tend to parallel the bass to compress it and make sure that the low end is sort of very solid and very punchy. Sometimes we also add another parallel so we can get some presence in the bass, because we tend to find that with a lot of bass recordings, you sort of lose that top end, sort of kind of dull, especially if people haven't replaced the strings. And we will typically distort the top end and mix that in so that the bass is felt all the way through the mix.
That's right. That's right. In fact, let's get a few things right. The bass, of course, is a lot about the low end because it carries the energy of the track, but also it is a lot about mids, because what gives you the perception of the note is actually the mids. So one of the techniques that we use when paralleling the bass, we make sure that we've got enough distortion that the higher harmonics are a bit excited. So if we have our low A being, I don't know, 110, because that's what it would be, wouldn't it? 55, 55,
Yeah.
110. So we make sure that 220 are a bit excited as well. And also with bass, you can get away with a lot of distortion, because you can't really tell once the music is going. You will be able to listen to the note more if the bass is a bit distorted, and you won't realize how distorted it is actually. What you're only going to perceive is how distinguishable the note that's being played is. So of course, and as usual, having a little compression many times helps you compact that sound. So if you have your original bass, then you might apply a little bit of compression there. Then you have your parallel channel that's running along with it. That can be a lot compressed, and it can be like a extreme version of it that you sneak in, and you can add a lot of distortion to that, so that as you sneak in the treated parallel channel, you will get more perception of the bass, and then both channels go to a bass bus, to an auxiliary channel, which you then can compress a little bit more, so that the compression is part of a chain that gets more and more as we approach mastering, essentially. Tom, why don't you explain sidechain compression?
Well, that's it's when you were talking about bass, sidechain is what comes to mind. I mean, straight away, especially if we were talking about pop music, rock music, or even dance music.
EDM.
EDM, yes. Electronic music. What I'd like to add to what you were saying, Claudio, is that, for example, it's great. I mean, distortion is like an extreme, form of compression. So if you distort something, you basically compress it so much that, all the harmonics come out. So one thing that we use a lot on bass is the culture vulture.
That's right.
Which is great because basically it gives you all these nice harmonics that are very pleasing to the ear. Most people, when they mix bass, they tend to think, okay, it's the low end, so I have to take care of the low end. So they treat all the 60 to 80 hertz area, but they forget about the mids, which is like the 200s. I've seen people scooping the 200s when it comes to bass, which is, sometimes you need to do that because there's a lot of mud in there, but it's a great area to give definition and perception of the low end.
Right.
So the culture vulture really helps with that because you can saturate that area, maybe even filter the parallel channel, and make the bass even more solid.
Yeah, just a little explanation. That piece of gear is from Thermionic culture, and that's what you get when you buy the tube option on the packages page on Dr. Mix. Just to say, but yeah, back to sidechain compression.
Sidechain, yeah, of course.
How do you apply that?
Sidechain in compression is really important so that the kick drum and the bass feel like they're the same thing, and maybe even if you have like a more loose, performance, from a band or something, it can really help to make the kick drum and the bass seem like they're playing at the same time. Yeah. It gives that perception. So what we do is we take the bass, the bass channel, the bass bus, and we add a compressor to the channel. Then we activate sidechain. Depending on your DAW, it might be a different process. But the principle is you get feed from the kick drum into the compressor that's applied to the bass channel. And then every time the kick drum plays, compression is applied to the bass channel.
Freeing up some space for the low end to come through.
So it leaves some space for the low end, which is very important. If you can gain lots of headroom using this technique, but it also helps with, depending on the style, you might compress more. For example, for electronic music, we tend to use more. For rock music, might be a bit less, but or even if we want to make it even more subtle. For example, for rock music, I wouldn't use sidechain sidechain compressor necessarily as one band, but we might use like a multi-band compressor so that we can only reduce the low end, but we leave the top end because rock bass needs to cut through all the time. It doesn't need to be ducked.
Exactly.
So that's, there are many approaches.
So let me just a little bit expand on that. What Dom is referring to is when we take the feed from the bass drum, and rather than making the bass quieter when the kick drum is hitting, we only make the low end of the bass quieter, so that the mids and the top end still cut through and they determine the notes so that our ear can understand it, but we still get some space down there. Okay, there is a lot of ground to cover again, but all right, I just wanted to touch on something else with Aaron. What are the compressors that you would use on bass?
Generally, on the main bass, we would use something like an LA2A or an LA2A style compression, because it helps to make the bass sort of very nice and round and warm and gives it a lot of low end. And on the parallel, we'd probably use something along the lines of a 76 or distressor, which can sort of adds the punch and fills in the low end and sort of helps bring up a lot of the less loud information, like the string noise and the presence of the bass. Sort of makes it a bit more aggressive, a bit more gritty, helps it cut through.
Fantastic. There was one last thing that I wanted to say about bass. You basically want to get it as compact as possible before you get to the final stage. Another trick can be using a little bit of limiter on the bus for the bass. So that means that I am just slamming it a little bit. It doesn't have to be at high volume, but have like a limiting like compression as a last thing before you hit the mix bus. And that will help that sort of loudness enhancement process going a little bit more. And as always, using the Fletcher-Munson curve, you can give it a little bit of mids right there, and you will gain some presence. So we have lots of questions about bass, so why don't we tackle them? Q&A time. All right, what have we got, Aaron?
Okay, our first question comes from Matt Perkins, who asks, how do you get that Prince funk slap bass tone / sound that features heavily on tracks like Let's Work It and Lady Cab Driver?
All right, funk slap bass. Firstly, if you're going to go for slap bass, make sure it's tasteful, because it can get so cheesy so quickly. Prince can handle it. That track at that time, what was it, like 1981? I can't remember the name of his bass player, the left-handed guy. Do we remember the name of Prince's bass player? I can't remember. You have to look it up on the internet. But typically, a good sound would be Fender Jazz. That's for sure. You might want to have good strings, new strings. It's the passive sound. If you're going to go for the active sound, then you get a more like a 90s sort of GRP, John Patitucci sort of sound, which is I like that. But for that kind of sort of retro sound, you probably have a passive bass like a Fender Jazz. It would be, if I remember correctly, that sort of bass sound is a bit scooped in the mids, so it's a bit, fat and, a little bit that R&B vibe to it. For an amplifier, I would probably use a BX15 Ampeg, which is probably what they would have had at the time. I can't bet on it, but, and then, compression, probably with a pedal. That's your choice, but yeah, you need compression right from the instrument to get that good slap bass sound.
Yeah, because it's more of a sort of a percussive sound than it is a strict bass line.
That is right, and also the compressor helps bring that note out for exactly that reason.
Okay, our second question comes from Jay Doherty, who asks, bass always seems to be muddy and not clearly recognizable in the mix. What's the cure?
Dom, hit it.
Well, the first thing is to make sure that your room is not contributing to the problem, right? So,
Very good point.
so yeah, it's like if you have to make sure that it's not your actual room acoustics that make your bass sound muddy. I mean, I've worked in many rooms. I've helped many people in less than ideal rooms, and you can immediately tell if a room is contributes to the problem if you play a sweep, a sine sweep. Every DAW has that.
We have a video for that.
Exactly.
With a full sweep, so you can test that. Just go to the YouTube channel, YouTube /.
You have everything already made for you,
Hey
guys.
We're called Dr. Mix for a reason, Dr. Mix, YouTube / Dr. Mix TV.
Yeah, you will see immediately if you have a problem in your room, you will see that some frequencies will get louder as the sweep goes up. So that's one thing to check. Then, it might be that you're exaggerating the low end because your speakers can't reproduce it, basically. So that makes your whole track sound muddy because you have so much low end and you can't control it.
That's right.
Then if your low end is okay and you have proper speakers and a treated room, then that means there's something that you have to do in the mids to make it cut through. And maybe reduce some frequencies. Maybe you have to reduce some of the 300s because there might be some mud in there. A very good EQ would help. Maybe with a narrow EQ you find the problematic frequencies. You have to make sure that you don't go too narrow, because if you go with a very narrow Q, every frequency will be annoying. So you might end up cutting all the frequencies. Yeah. So just with a narrow Q but not too narrow. Check what frequencies are really annoying. It will be around 300, 400, and then try adding some 1K, 200, and this will fix your problem.
I will just add a little bit to this. Make conscious decisions of who is doing what in the low end. So if the bass drum is going for 80 hertz as a main frequency, just try for the bass to hit 100 maybe. Just have the bass and the bass drum not to fight for the exact same spot. If they are fighting for this exact same spot, use some docking, some sidechain compression. And then again, filter out the low end from other sources like the pads. They can go very low, but you don't need all that low. So you can easily cut below 100 or even 120 with pads. So make sure you've made space for the bass to express itself, and then make conscious decisions on who's gonna do what in the track to represent the low end.
That could easily be the first tip for bass, actually. But yeah, if you cut, if your bass is mainly in 80 hertz, which is, more than often the case, and your kick drum is 60 hertz, then you can cut 60 hertz from the, bass.
Yeah.
And leave some room for the kick drum.
Yeah, and remember that the low end is the credibility of your mix, and the low end goes as low as, can go up to 50 or even 40. As you said before, you can't hear it, but you can feel it when you play it on a big system. So use a pair of good headphones to check on that, because 50 hertz, that's going to be a long wave. You would need a room of, I don't know how many meters to represent that, and huge speakers. So you have to use headphones and maybe your meters. Just make sure that everything is nice and clean. Have we got time for another question, Darren?
Yep. Our last question comes from Nick, who asks, how do you achieve that really low punchy bass? I make house music, and when I compare to a released track, it always seems to have extra sub that makes the bass sound bigger.
All right, I'm going to take this last question. Okay. Don't be afraid of pushing the low end. You have to be careful, but once you're found your balance, try this trick. Go on the mix bus and use an EQ there, because there is only so much that you can do on the individual channels or on the bus channels. At some point, you need to enhance the mix bus. So use a good, mastering grade equalizer like The EOS is Air EQ is fantastic. Also, it's got great phase correlation, so that is a great choice. Do a narrow EQ around, try 40, 50, try 50, 60, 80. See what sounds nice, and then once you found your frequency, get it down to like 2 or 3 dBs, not more than that. But it's gotta be a little bit narrow. It can't be too wide, because otherwise you are enhancing the whole of the low end. So by adding, like with compression, if you add a little bit of EQ here and there, all the way up to the mastering chain, then you can make your bass more solid and more effective.
Can I add something more in terms of production? Because, mixing is very important, of course, especially with these genres. But when you find that you don't have enough low end on your bass line, maybe it's because you're using a patch or, a synth patch that you've created, and it doesn't have this low end that you need. So, cool trick is keep your bass line, filter it, and duplicate it with a simple sine wave. So if you have a MIDI track and you have your bass line triggering your favorite synthesizer, or however you create your synth lines, just duplicate that and use a simple sine wave. Any synth can produce that, and just layer it. And this will give you the low end you're looking for. If it's not a mixing thing, that will give you the low end you're looking for. That's,
Oh, that's a great trick, actually. I haven't been using that trick in a long time.
You have.
But I have, but for mixing, because when I actually play, and for example, when I use the rephase, the CS, it's great because I can decide the amount of low end because I am making the sound as I am playing in it. And for example, if I get a click in front of the bass when I hit it, and that click is working against the kick drum, you know what I'll do? I'll just add a little bit of attack so that I get a little like that.
Yeah.
So I make some space for the transients of the kick drum to first hit, and then the bass will come in. And because I'm playing it, then I can kind of play with that little delay that comes with the attack, and I can play along with it. So in actual facts, I am mixing as I am recording. That's why I don't use that trick when, when I produce music.
But that's the thing. Most people get excited about bass patches that don't have low end, or they have low end, but it's not the solid low end that you need for house music, for EDM music. You always need a sine wave, either on the kick drum or on the bass.
Yeah. Also, make it mono.
Make
it mono. The bass is mono. Forget about everything else. Yes, if you have like stereo keyboards that have a big riff and they have like a bass value to it, yes, by all means, use it stereo and do whatever you want. But if you want the bass to be compact, just make sure that whatever is below 100 or even 90, it's definitely mono.
One more thing. If you want to make your bass wide, that trick can help a lot, because you keep the sine wave dead center, and then the other synth, that's your top bass line, you can spread it with with a stereo enhancer, so you get wide, but also the solid low end in the middle.
Fantastic.
Okay.
All right.
I'll stop now.
We could talk forever about this. So, in any case, if you want to know more about our mixing, mastering, and production services, just visit us on www.drmix.com. Send us an email or send us a message through the contact page. And remember to like and subscribe to our videos on YouTube. Subscribe to this very podcast. And I will see you next week with more tips.